Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, episode number 79. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, voracious reader of many genres and one of your co-founders and hosts, coming to you today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
And I am Darren Kazenko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and one of your co-hosts and co-founders of the Australian Book Lovers podcast and website, coming to you today from a wonderfully glorious sunny Ghana country, so where I'm currently recording by the sparkling blue waters and about to head off to the out to the bush. So little bit of all-round land stuff and water today.
That is so not fair, because we went for a walk this morning here in Victoria and drizzle, heavy, so we had to turn around. Well, we didn't have to, but we turned around halfway and came home again. So it's miserable and grey and hideous, but anyway, there you go.
Maybe I'll have to come up with some funky umbrellas and start a umbrella factory down in Victoria.
Yeah, well, I think we do pretty well with our jumpers and coats and raincoats and all sorts of things. Yeah, it means you get to wear them. Now, we've got a lot in episode 79, a few new things, but just give us a quick intro to our special guest author.
Yes, absolutely. So for episode 79, I was super lucky to be able to interview author Magdalena Ball. Now, as you'll hear, Magdalena is going to talk all about her brand new release called Bobish, which is quite unique, as you will discover. And Magdalena was actually born in New York City, and but now, of course, calls Australia home. So lots of interesting stuff there. So yes, grab a cuppa, grab a wine, whatever it might be, for when that interview comes around, which won't be too long at all. Maybe you might guess 30 minutes or so. But yeah, fantastic opportunity, and still waiting for those submissions. It was just so cool to chat, and a little bit about the New York in the 80s, and then also the love affair that Magdalena had with Australia, and still has, of course, and talking about her latest release, which is long form poetry, which we'll get into more in the interview, which is very interesting and very special indeed. Yeah,
excellent. All right, so start us off with the number 79.
Oh, okay, if you insist, absolutely. Well, apparently the number 79 does represent many things in life, so that narrows it down, doesn't it? But those things include a potential spiritual awakening. So that's pretty cool. And it also may indicate the opportunity or the event of moving into a new phase and harnessing your personal intuition. So the number 79 is also possibly an indicator that one may be reaching the end of one life cycle and in the process of approaching a new one. So I do always like the idea of being able to drop some shackles and start a new cycle, because I think sometimes that's what life is about a little bit, isn't it? You go get muddy and then you hose it off and start again. But would you like to know a little bit about, because do we have any bingo calls before we jump into the year?
We do indeed. So 79 is a nice easy one. So if you are the bingo caller, you can say 79 one more time.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to have something to do with wine, but one more time?
No, one more time. And really, 79 one more time is a nice rhyme, along our thread of poetry for this episode. I think that's good.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So what happened in 1979? Besides me beginning my nursing career and going to a few pubs and doing a few things, moving out of home, all those kind of things.
Oh, interesting. A lot more adventurous than my 1979.
You're a little bit younger.
Yeah, but I do think, I can't remember if it was 78 or 79, I was a little tacky, but it's one of my first sort of strong memories of it was my birthday, and a friend of mine got me a Kiss T-shirt. It had all the glitter, the Kiss glitter. But the thing was, I didn't like Kiss.
Oh, no!
And I remember as a little kid pretending in my head, thinking, pretend to like it. So that's my random little thought for 1979. But as far as the year, it was definitely a mixed bag of drama and interesting facts. On the 4th of January, now I assume this hasn't been broken yet, but Australia's highest daily rainfall was recorded, 1,140 millimetres, so over a metre in one day. And that was recorded, of course, in Queensland at the Bellenden Care Top Station. So definitely need the Wellingtons or the kayaks out that day.
Yeah, I wonder whether the last kind of round of dreadful weather events have eclipsed that.
Be interesting to know. I think maybe for a time period, but as far as for one day, that's pretty epic. That's biblical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, this one is quite an important one. 9th of March in 1979, the Arbitration Commission finally awards Australian women the right to 6 weeks compulsory, unpaid, mind you, maternity leave, with the option of extending to the leave, should I say, to 1 year. So, and that was basically the provisions that flowed towards covering women in the private sector, and that took effect on 2nd of April. So a little bit of a sharp turn in the way...
Good start. Yeah.
That's really good. And now the 5th of May, James William Miller, aged 39, this is a bit of an Adelaide one, was charged with the murders of 4 young women, and also known as the Truro murders. And then at the time when he was charged, a 5th body had been found, and police at the time were searching for 2 more bodies, so bring the total number of victims to 7. So yeah, it's quite an infamous sort of serial killing or at least murder here in Adelaide. Yeah, so, and I think there's plenty of stuff you can find about that, but that was the Truro murders, 1979. A fire at Luna Park in Sydney unfortunately killed 7 people. 4 young boys, a father and his 2 young sons died when the fire basically erupted across one of the rides, which was due, they think, to an electrical fault. So a bit of an infamous day there for Luna Park. But on the 21st of June, here's a little bit of an uplifting, or shall we say motivational story. Up to 1 million workers, which would have been quite a big chunk of workers back then compared to the population. Up to 1 million workers stopped work all across the country in protest of the arrests of unionists in Western Australia for addressing a public meeting without police permission. So the public transport industry and commercial services were basically thrown into absolute chaos. So that's a huge response to... Now, I don't know the ins and outs of the meeting and whether the police were overstepping their mark, but I can't remember in my time being alive here. Well, because I don't remember. I was alive in 79, but I wasn't watching news then. I was watching cartoons. But I don't remember any sort of million-plus revolt or protest.
No.
So that one's a pretty epic little number to reach.
Yeah, indeed.
On the 11th of July, the American Space Station Skylab crashed into Esperance in Western Australia. So a bit
I remember Skylab.
Yeah, a bit of sky junk.
Yeah.
Was it a big story at the time? I'm sure
absolutely. And a stack of people went out looking for bits and pieces, which they said, please don't, or if they do, you've got to hand them in. So I suspect there's a lot of backyards with bits and pieces of Skylab in it. But yeah, no, it was a big thing. I think initially because they thought it might land closer to a city and be dangerous was the other thing as well.
Well, it would have been nice to have found a few computer chips in the backyard. And but there was no eBay back then, so you would be able to offload it for a good price. But on brighter news, sticking in Perth, or at least in Western Australia, the Miss Universe final was celebrated there. So, yeah, getting a bit of a global spotlight.
Yep.
On the 7th of October, the Australia Refugee Advisory Council was established. So, you know, whether they are doing the job properly or not, I'm not too sure, but at least it was a step in the right direction back then in 1979. Oddly enough, 79, the Australian Federal Police was also established under the command of Colin Woods. So that was a bit of a milestone for law and order and perhaps our ability to play on the criminal global stage, because obviously the federal...
our ability to play on the criminal global stage. An interesting way to put it, but yep, I'm with
Well,
you.
the tentacles of our investigation, I guess, became a little bit more international on a proper level. Now, Malcolm Fraser proclaimed the first section of the Great Barrier Reef as a national park, and so that was a good sort of start to try and protect what such a beautiful part of the country and part of the world. Sunday trading in Sydney public bars began. Woohoo! On the 16th of December, so oddly enough, right at the most religious part of the year. Now, when it comes to a quick bit of entertainment, David Ireland's novel A Woman of the Future won the Miles Franklin Award. My Brilliant Career, which directed by Gillian Armstrong, was released. There was a very cool TV show that made its debut on the Net 0-10 network, and if I told you that he used to bring me roses, would you know what the show is?
Yes. Prisoner.
Ding, 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 we've got a winner. I think one of the most quintessential Australian TV series ever made, and I love the fact how, if I remember correctly, how good they used their low funding, like obviously trying to stretch every cent possible, because you had the prison scenes, but then if you went to one of the screws, as they called them, if they were like a home scene or something, oddly enough, there were never any windows in their house, and it looked suspiciously like a prison, just only decorated a bit better. But on the final sort of entertainment news, and I think this is a huge one, such a cultural milestone for Australia, and a cultural milestone, and a full stop, a milestone for cinema in general. The release of none other than Mad Max.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
And synchronicity always popping its head up every now and then. I literally just received my big box original Roadshow copy of Mad Max VHS. So it is sitting with pride position at the moment on top of my synthesizer. And so I mean, the world has been a better place ever since Mad Max came in.
There you go.
Yeah. And as far as inventions, another big milestone, in 1979, a digital sampler was born right here in Australia. It was called the Fairlight CMI, which is computer musical instrument. It was the first polyphonic digital sampling synthesizer. And it was designed by the founders of Fairlight, Peter Vogel and Kim Ryan in Sydney, Australia. And I reckon if you could find one of those synthesizers, it would probably be worth more than those massive trucks that we're getting imported from America at the moment. That are blocking Woolworths car parks. But I was going to go down the rabbit hole and look at all the albums that might have been using some of that technology, but we'd probably be here forever. So there we go, a little bit of a snapshot of Australia in 1979.
There you go. All right. As you know, we finished our Aussie slang and idioms, and I had several choices about what to share with people, and I really wanted to think about, knowing that we were going to talk about poetry this episode with Magdalena Ball's lovely work, I wanted to share, and I think I might have shared a little bit with you before, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows by John Koenig.
Ah, you have, yes.
Yeah. So the book is actually now released. He's got a podcast out there, but some of the words are just amazing, and it slips very nicely into my quote, which I've got for later in the episode. So I thought I would share 3 of the words that John has made up. And it all kind of fits very nicely. I'm currently reading, or one of the books that I'm currently reading is called Bittersweet by Susan Cain, and the subtitle of that is, let me turn the page because the library has put a sticker over the subtitle, unfortunately. So it's called Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. And I thought, look, we always tend to talk about, a whole range of things here. We don't shy away from the sad and all those kind of bits and pieces. And Susan Cain talks about Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, saying that there were 4 humours that the human body contains, liquid substances, whatever they had, each corresponding to a different temperament. Melancholic, which is sad, sanguine, which is happy, choleric, which is aggressive, and phlegmatic, which was calm. And she talks in her book about how, particularly her experience in the American culture is such that you try not to think about the sad bits, and everybody tries to be super happy, but bittersweet is that kind of combination of sorrow and joy that makes you yearn, or that kind of longing. So all of those things have got me in the mood for thinking, yep, I'm going back to read more of John Koenig's Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. So here are 3 words, and one, this is very timely, austice, which is Austice. It's a noun, a wistful omen of the first sign of autumn, a subtle coolness in the shadows, a rustling of dead leaves abandoned on the sidewalk, or a long skein of geese sweeping over your head like the second hand of a clock. How's
Very
that?
interesting, yes.
Isn't that? Oysters, it's so evocative the way he describes them. He'll often do a little video with images that sort of details what he's thinking as well. So it's worth having a bit of a look online and sharing this. So that's austice.
And that's,
kind of
and I would describe austice as a little bit bittersweet too.
Yeah,
because,
yeah, absolutely.
it's the end of
Yes.
summer, but
Yeah.
so I do cry a little, but then I am also excited for the fairyland of winter to arrive.
Yeah, at least you got some summer over there. I think we were cheated over here. But anyway, all right. So this is one that I'm hoping to feel very soon. Eterath, Eteerath. And it's the feeling of emptiness after a long and arduous process is finally complete. So having finished school, recovered from surgery, or gone home at the end of your wedding, which leaves you relieved that it's over, but missing the stress that organised your life into a mission. So I really like that, because I'm writing as I mentioned before we began, I'm writing a really big tender, and I think when I submit it, it'll be like, oh, thank goodness, I'm feeling Eterath, that emptiness, which is like I've been, hammering at it for 2 weeks. So can you get a sense of that emptiness?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think with the, playing on stage, back when I was doing the shows, there'd be, there's the work that you put into, doing the rehearsals and all that sort of, all the shenanigans that come with that. And then there's the anticipation and the nervous energy for a couple of days leading up. Then there's the full-blown nervous energy if it's a big show on the day.
Yep.
And then a part of you sort of says, well, why am I doing this? Because it's overwhelming. And there's that sense of once you reach a point where, it's like I've always likened it to a roller coaster ride. There's a point you reach where there is no getting off the ride. You're in.
Yes.
There's no bailing out. Yeah. Especially playing fast technical music, and then so you get up there and you hit that first note and you are locked in. There is no you've assigned yourself with your own destiny. You have to do the ride all the way to the end.
Yep.
And then of course when you finish, oh lordy, it is quite a relief, but in a hollow relief, because there's just absolute magic. You end up in this amazing place mentally and physically, and it's a special moment. And then and it finishes, and you're empty because all the energy's gone, and you're so glad that it's over, because you can, all that anticipation, everything just falls away. But then there's also that somewhat hollowness, isn't it?
That kind of emptiness.
All the goals suddenly go boo down.
I'm sure that most writers, particularly those who've finished a manuscript, will be able to describe that feeling of Eterath, which is that emptiness after a long and arduous process is finally complete. Because as you type the end, and I know that was one of the prompts on Twitter for Ozrights this month was about endings, and it's how do you know when your manuscript is ending? And I think perhaps if that feeling of emptiness is there you go. All right, I've got one more word for you, and it is again to do with books, and where I'm hoping to go this afternoon, which is whiz up and look at some old bookstores in Daylesford. So the word is Velicor.
Oh, that sounds like a cool name.
Yeah, the strange wistfulness of used bookstores, which are somehow infused with the passage of time, filled with thousands of old books you'll never have time to read, each of which is itself locked in its own era, bound and dated and papered over like an old room the author abandoned years ago, a hidden annex littered with thoughts left just as they were on the day they were captured.
I do love that idea of trying
Isn't
to
that
capture
good?
that mystery, that magic of the that is the second-hand bookshop.
The strange wistfulness of used bookstores that are somehow infused with the passage of time. I love it. Really good. So that's Velicor. So you've heard austice, a wistful omen of the first sign of autumn. Get that into a sentence this week, people. You've heard Eterath, that feeling of emptiness after a long and arduous process is finally complete. And our third new word is velikor, the strange wistfulness of used bookstores. I love used bookstores.
Oh,
so there you
yes.
go, all from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows by John Koenig. Thank you, John.
And yes, second-hand bookshops are, of course, well, they're getting fewer and far between, or further between, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I am, every month or two, when I do have a little bit of time, I like to have a coffee, and then, like a lot of people out there, zoom around and visit all the second-hand shops, the St. Vincent's, I think, what are they called down here, Savers, and looking through all the books. I'm always on the hunt for, my little thing at the moment is the original 60s, 70s sci-fi horror and the 80s sort of pulp horror books.
Of course you are.
Which are they're not easy to find, and when you do find some, you got to grab them. I did get lucky the other week, and there was a whole stack, I think it was someone's collection, that had been released, and all these like late 80s books, amazing. And I had two arms full. And I thought, because they were going out for $1 each, it was ridiculous.
Oh, well, you just have to go then, really,
yeah,
don't
so
you?
I'm like, a kid in a candy shop, and as I'm standing there waiting, someone behind me said, "Oh, you got a bargain?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And then he saw some of the titles, and he's like, "I've been looking for some of those, that author. I'm always looking for that author." And I was like, you know what? There's still some left over there. So 2 minutes later, I turned around, and he's behind me with an armful of books. But on my most recent little treasure hunt, so just to bring all the synchronicity around, when I was still playing, I wrote a song called God's Killers, being the idea that, is it people who kill God, or is it people that kill for God, God's Killers?
Yeah.
But anyway, and then there in the bookshop is this little dusty, very 60s looking little novel called The God Killers. And I was like, oh, wow. A, it's the book, that's the style that I'm collecting, and B, what a title. Unbeknownst to me, I have a look in, and it is by John Baxter, an Australian science fiction writer. So there we go. Out of nowhere.
Good circles are in circles, yes.
Good circles within circles, yes.
Yeah.
That's me rambling on today enough, I think. Would you like to jump into some news?
Absolutely. Bring on the news. Couple of little bits and items of news, one of which we've missed the dates because we have got busy, but it's something to remember for next year, is Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And given that we chatted to Austin Sheehan and EJ Dawson in the Writers' Lounge, and they mentioned the Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and it is the 13th to 19th of March, but still, think about that, people. There's opportunities to get involved, and really, we've also had Women's History Month and a few other bits and pieces, and I think, should it just be, your favourite things, should they just be this week or this month or this day? And I think we can consider something like neurodiversity. We should be celebrating it all the time. So there you go. Of course, the big news in Australia is that the Voice to Parliament referendum has come out with the question. So the wording is a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And there's a yes or no. So get yourself some information on what you would like to know about this. I know the Yes Party are running a whole lot of yarning circles, so the Uluru Statement, the people that have been putting that together, they're running some yarning stories, which is ask about some bits and pieces. They'll explain what kind of sits behind it. So I'm going to one of those online halfway through next week, I think. So find out if you've not already decided, which I kind of have, but if you've not already decided, find out some more. Don't necessarily listen to the pollies. Go and find out from the people who are putting the practices together, and find out about that, which is really good. Other one to talk about, of course, because you've been telling us all about the Adelaide Festival, is that in fact the Melbourne Writers Festival is happening in May. So tickets are out. The program is set. There's still a little bit of to and fro with a few bits and pieces, but jump on to Melbourne Writers Fest and have a look and bag yourself a ticket. And the final thing is that announcements for the Australian Romance Readers Awards are on tonight, and so that's you can look at ARRA Inc. and get yourself onto the YouTube channel and find out who the winners are. I know that I've got some favourites that I hope are there, but I'm not going to put the moz on them to see if they won or not. So they are my news bits for today. What have you got for us?
I thought I would highlight a couple of short story and poetry competitions coming up. So,
nice.
Yes, to mark the transition, that bittersweet leaving behind of summer and entering autumn. So, the first one is called the Silver Tree Poetry Competition of 2023,
nice.
And the closing date is 30th of April 2023 this year. So, still got a bit of time now. Under the Silver Tree holds writing competitions to further their mission of encouraging reading, writing and the love of literature. And the Silver Tree basically acknowledges the continuous support of West Darling art. So the submission is for poetry. There is a word limit of 50 lines. There is an entry fee of $10. However, the prize is $1,000. So if you'd like to learn more, just visit underthesilvertree.com and you'll find the competition there. Now, the Furphy Open Short Story Competition is ready to go and closing on the 30th of April also of 2023. So it is in the spirit of Archibald and honouring the author of Such Is Life. The Furphy Literary Award has been established to promote and extend the tradition of storytelling, both factual and fictional, that is so much part of Australian life. So the theme for this Open Short Story Competition is Australian life in all its diversity. And it is short story. It does have a word limit of 5,000 words. Now, I can't see an entry fee, but there are prizes. The first prize, get ready for this, $15,000.
Whoa.
Second prize, $3,000. And third prize, $2,000. So, yes, there you go. You still get those pens out, keyboards out, dictators, microphones, mobile phones, however you jot down your notes. And visit Furphy Story, which is Furphy, so Furphy, as in telling a Furphy.
Furphy water cart, remember?
Yes, absolutely. Furphystory.com.au, where you can find all the details for that competition. So wouldn't it be nice to win $15,000 and get the, I'm assuming a good little bit of marketing opportunity there for your writing. So
I could know how to spend that.
Yes. Oh, now I just got to think of a cool story to tell. No, I don't know if they'll take horror ones. Although, I could do other stuff, maybe. But right, we've got another competition. It's called What Matters? ? Writing competition. The closing date is the 5th of May, so you got a bit longer. This one is inspired by Gough Whitlam's commitment to involving young people in shaping Australia's future. The What Matters writing competition is currently open to school students in years 5 to 12 from Australia. Responding to the simple question, what matters? Entrants are free to express their views on any matter they care about. So the format is short story. There is a word limit of 600 words. There is no entry fee. Now, when it comes to prizes, the overall competition winner will be announced at the awards ceremony, will receive $1,500 cash, a personalised trophy, a very special package from the Museum of Australian Democracy, and that includes a bespoke digital excursion program with the MOAD learning team connecting live to their classroom, and the winner's school library will receive a unique and curated selection of books focused on active citizenship, civics and democracy. So pretty cool. So if any listeners out there have children, know of children currently in school years 5 to 12, get them on board. They've got till the 5th of May, and that is the Gough Whitlam's, based on Gough Whitlam's commitment, but it's the What Matters writing competition. And you can learn more by visiting www.whitlam.org and follow. Yeah, so a couple of competitions there to hopefully get a few writers out there excited, whether you want to whip together a poetry of up to 50 lines, whether you wanted to do the Furphy Awards and tell an Australian yarn or story and a theme based on Australian life and also diversity with a limit of 5,000 words, or if you are a school student, years 5 to 12, or know somebody in that fantastic period of education, then short story up to 600 words and be in the running for some fantastic prizes. Mm-hmm. And that is my news for episode 79, because we've still got so much to come.
Good news. Yes, bring it on. I think we're into the Writers' Cafe. Are we ready?
This is true. I think we'll go in and sip a bit of a hot beverage before the wonderful interview coming up with, of course, Magdalena Ball. So I'll meet you in the cafe.
Excellent. Let's jump in. So here we are in the Reader's Cafe, and I'm going to say it's cold. The heater is on, but we've just clanged the bell on the door, slid into the bench seats, and I have ordered a cup of chai tea, of course, with a little honey. This is a special treat for myself. Hey Darren, what have you ordered?
I think, being that it is gloriously sunny today, but it was a little bit nippy this morning, but that's because I've run around in shorts and bare feet, but I think I'm going to go for a little cup of chicken noodle soup.
Chicken noodle soup? Oh,
yeah, I like a good cup of soup. Yes, absolutely. Although, speaking of Writers' Cafe and chai, now, I don't know if I'm out of touch, but I don't drink much milk anymore. I haven't for a couple of years. I just have black coffee. I still enjoy milkshake here and there, of course, and all that jazz. But where I work, I noticed I keep my ground coffee in the freezer, and I noticed these 2-litre containers of this weird yellow frozen liquid.
Right.
And I was like, what's that? Is someone freezing cordial or what is it? But apparently that's milk frozen for later. Now, I can't remember milk turning yellow when it freezes, so I don't know.
I'd be a little worried.
The new style milk, or the low-fat milk, I don't know, but I used to freeze milk all the time, and I remember it'd be like white and snowy.
Yeah.
So there we go. I don't know. So I'll stick with my soup or black coffee in the cafe until I can unravel that mystery a little bit more. But there we go. Maybe that could be my short story, Australian story for the competition, The Case of the Yellow Milk.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Go.
That could be a horror very easily. But have you got some new books for us? What has gone up on the website this week or in the last little while?
Yep. So for all of our wonderful listeners out there, if you are looking for a new book to read, of course, while I'm sitting here sipping on my chicken noodle soup, I thought I might tell you about some of the great new titles that are landing on the Australian Book Lovers website. The first one I'd like to let you know about is a science fiction book, and it is actually a sequel. It is called Intelligence Horizon by author R. Andrew Russell, and that's actually the sequel to Intelligence Consent. Intelligence Horizon reads as follows. Robert and Rob, the robot programmed with his brain scan, were introduced in my previous novel, Intelligent Consent. Now, the future of Robert and his companion Anastasia is balanced on a knife edge. As part of Project Transition, they are key developers of scanning technology used to copy the structure of the human brain and load it into intelligent robots. Augustin Selworthy employs them to help create military robots. However, this application turns out to be a smokescreen hiding their true purpose, which involves locating and controlling a priceless treasure. Augustin intends to kill them if they try to escape his control, or when Project Transition is complete and they outlive their usefulness. As a further complication, Project Transition is threatened by Limitless Boundaries, a shadowy organisation intent on the elimination of all advanced robots. Maxwell, the leader of Limitless Boundaries, believes robots are an existential threat to humanity and must be totally eliminated. Meanwhile, 2 intelligent robots, Rob and Sam, renamed Penny, have been sent to Mars to help Augustin achieve his all-consuming dream. Although their thoughts and ideas exactly parallel the humans who are scanned to create their robotic brains, they realise they have no right to control their lives or even a guarantee of their continued existence. Can they fend off attacks by transplanetary bandits and, in parallel with Anastasia and Robert on Earth, use all of their cunning to outwit Augustin? As a robot, Rob believes in the future for intelligent robots and explains to Penny, "We're limited in how far into the future we can predict human attitudes to robots. I like to think of this as the intelligence horizon. Hopefully, beyond this horizon, intelligent robots may be accepted as having at least some rights. So that is a little bit of a glimpse into what is waiting for you in Intelligent Horizons, and of course the sequel to Intelligence Consents. Now the author, R. Andy Russell, he's actually spent most of his life working in the research field of intelligent robots or robotics. So definitely the man you want at the helm of the pen for a story about robots and existentialism and philosophical musings on when intelligence is, or artificial intelligence can then be granted, I guess, or share the right to exist. Very interesting. Very Blade Runner-ish too, I think, of course, because that was all about the androids that were programmed with a limited time frame and felt that they deserved more life.
Well, indeed. I'm reading one of the books that I'm reading is Firefall by Peter Watts. And yeah, look, it's aliens and a few other bits and pieces. It's a really
all
apparently sorry?
All good things, aliens.
All good things, alien. But of course, as you get a little bit further, I've just finished sort of the first book. It's a duology smooshed into a single volume, and you just discover that really it was the IA that was running the ship, that was kind of running the vampire, that was running the expedition. So yeah, sorry, spoilers for anybody who hasn't read Firefall, but I'm interesting to read then Echopraxia. So it's kind of a weird horror alien AI thing going on.
I think, AI, many of us may still dismiss it at the moment, but just think of how many people, especially, coming up now, who have only ever lived in a period where they carry mobile phones, and at how much of an influence social media is already having. What happens when AI controls social media? Essentially, we're all walking around with an AI stick in our hand that's going to smack us and lead us into directions it wants us to. But anyway, on a brighter note, we have a book by our wonderfully awesome author, shall I say, Maria P. Frino, who's contributed so much to the website, and she has just released a brand new young adult book called Edward's Cat. And so this one reads as follows. Edward has a twin sister, or rather had, until cancer took Millie away from them. Edward lives with his mother, Vanessa. His father was also taken by cancer when he and Millie were young. His mother had returned to work and beginning a life without a husband when Millie was diagnosed. She and Edward know about grief, and their sadness was compounded because Millie was only 10 when she passed. Millie had a magical power. She was able to shapeshift into a cat. This power was inherited by Edward, although he isn't able to control when he transformed. Millie didn't concede all her powers to her twin. However, Edward finds a way to use his power as Millie the cat to help kids at his school who are being bullied, which includes him. During Year 6, Edward is terrorised by Chase and his cronies, but thankfully they don't follow him to his new high school. But this isn't the end of being bullied. Buster and his gang are waiting for the geeks who arrive at Redmond High in Year 7. Edward enlists the help of other geeks like him, and along with his friend Trudy and another unexpected helper, they give back as much as they receive. Edward, as Millie the cat, and along with all the geeks, does his best to stop the bullies and teach others how to stand up to this abuse. This magical realism story is for young adult readers from 10 years of age up to adults who enjoy stories that involve magic. It is a coming-of-age story that shows how grief can be debilitating, but with time, life can return, as does happiness. Edward uses his power for good, making good friends along the way while becoming the person he wants to be. So that is Edward's Cat by Maria P. Frino, and you'll find that under our young adults. So,
very good.
Yes.
She's trying all sorts of different things, Maria, isn't she? She's really spreading her writing wings.
Yeah, absolutely, dipping her toes in all sorts of genres. So all more power to Maria, yay! And now we also have a book I'd like to spotlight from our biographies and memoirs section. Of course, our glorious little wombat, who I'm hoping to see a few wombats this afternoon. So this book is called Teida's Story, and it is by author Danielle Corrie. Now, Danielle's dog Teida, a Staffordshire Terrier ex-red cattle dog, inspired Danielle to write Teida's life story after their good friend Gary passed away. Teida Danielle and their friend Gary were like the three musketeers, and writing Teida's story, Life Through the Eyes of a Dog, was a way to share the connection they all had in the hope it will help others in some small way. Danielle had never written a book before. Actually, the only thing she ever wrote were letters to people interstate and pen pals overseas. So after 8 years of continuous writing and rewriting, editing and re-editing, and as much encouragement from a very good dear friend who thought Danielle's writing had good potential to turn into a book, Teida's story was born. Teida's story, Life Through the Eyes of a Dog, is a dog memoir where Teida tells her life story from a dog's point of view, from when she was a pup to her old senior years.
Be clever.
Teida was raised by a lady, and after 6 years of being with this lady, and due to unfortunate circumstances, had to find a new home. 4 days after her home was broken into, Teida came into Danielle's life and they bonded instantly. Danielle had never had a dog before. She worked long hours and came home late at night. She felt that she wasn't capable of looking after a dog. That was until Teida came into her life. In this heartfelt and emotional book, Teida shares her adventures with Danielle, the fun and happy times, as well as the fearful sad times. Teida discusses topics of grief and loss, friendship, hope, faith, and love. So there we go. That is Teida's story by author Danielle Corrie under our biographies and memoirs. So a couple of different things there. We've got a cat story about
Edward's cat and Teida
turning
the
into
dog.
a cat to take over bullies. We've got AI
And robots.
and human brain integrated robots, and we've got a biography told through the eyes of a wolfie.
Excellent.
There we go.
It sounds like we need to now dive into your interview. Can you introduce us a little bit to Magdalena?
Yes, I'll sip the last of my chicken noodle soup, pop that down, and I'll get out of the cafe where it's a bit too noisy so I can get ready for
Too true, yes.
Yeah, I'll see you outside.
All right, cheers, bye.
Okay, listen, so now's the really cool part of the show, of course, where we have the unique opportunity to talk to fantastic authors. And today is definitely a super special opportunity a special opportunity to chat with Magdalena Ball. And that means you have the absolute pleasure of hearing her talk all about her writing journey, her life journey from, one country to eventually to another. And, some beautiful, I guess you could say, insights, discussions, and really just the sharing of absolute love of poetry and the magic that it can sprinkle in all of our lives. So I won't say without further ado, and we won't say further ado, but then I've said it twice now. Please kick back, turn the volume up, and enjoy what was a really, special occasion to be able to talk with Magdalena Ball. Our very special guest today was born and raised in a place that is rumoured to never sleep, which is, of course, fabulous New York City, and now calls the wonderful blue skies of New South Wales home. Her journey from one side of the planet to the other has seen her gain an honours degree in English literature from the University of New York before travelling to Oxford to further her English studies, followed by a master's degree in business from Charles Sturt University, and finally a graduate marketing degree from the University of Newcastle. And that is just scratching the surface, because our guest is also a prolific author of more than 7 poetry books and novels Black Cow and Sleep Before Evening, which was a 3-year running winner of the My Shelf Nobel Prize. She is the creator of the hugely popular website Compulsive Reader and hosts a spectacular podcast called Compulsive Reader Talks that features more than 150 author interviews. And she has just released her brand new poetry novel titled Bobish. So, Magdalena Ball, a huge thank you for joining us and welcome to the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Darren. It's an absolute joy to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute joy to be able to chat with you, because I think there's going to be so much we can talk about. And I mean, look, straight off the bat, something tells me that your personal story is probably pretty damn amazing and interesting. So I'm wondering maybe if you would like to just share with our listeners a little bit about yourself to start with, and perhaps how writing became such an important part of your life.
Yeah, sure. Well, writing and maybe poetry in particular is kind of like something that I feel has always been with me. I've never not been writing. It's almost like, first there was breathing and then there was talking and then there was writing, but maybe there was writing before talking. Who knows? I've always been doing it since I was a child. And I was very lucky in many ways to grow up in a household where books were everywhere and constantly being read to me by my parents, by, my aunts and uncles, by people who came along. Like there were always books. And I always felt like, books they were a safe space for me, and they were a space where I could, like many young children, they were a space where I could kind of let my imagination go free. And so writing was always kind of a natural extension of my love of reading. If I wanted a story and I couldn't find it, I just write it, just to amuse myself. So I kind of grew up writing, and I went, I grew up reading and grew up writing, both sort of opposite sides of the coin. And as you said, I went to university to study it. But I guess it's fair to say that, I didn't really want. I went to Oxford to do a postgraduate degree in English Lit, and while I was there, it really occurred to me that I didn't really want to go into academia in this space. That it was kind of robbing me of that almost childlike and essential joy and pleasure.
Oh, interesting.
In the creative writing process. In fact, the supervisor that I had, I was doing a PhD, effectively a DPhil actually, but my supervisor, one of the first things he said to me after I submitted my first piece of writing was, way too many metaphors. Oh. So I probably should have taken that as a sign. But anyway, really, and I don't mind writing essays, even academic style essays. I get great pleasure out of exploring topics at that level, but I really didn't want to do it for a living. I didn't even want to write for a living. And while I was doing my postgraduate degree, I got a job, first teaching English, but then I very quickly got a job at a biotechnology facility. And
very different to teaching English.
Yeah, really different. But one of the things that I managed to get, even all those years ago before computers were everywhere. In fact, I'm old enough so that computers weren't everywhere when I was at university, not even, as a postgrad student. They were rare. You had to really be a computer science nerd to have one. And I had to book the computing room to be able to use one. But I did a lot of typing as an English major. So I learned to type very quickly, and that was enough, enough of a skill to get me into a job. And I realized that actually I enjoyed doing work that wasn't literary. I enjoyed actually working in a science area, in a science space. There was a lot of pleasure I got out of it, and in many ways inspired my writing too. So maybe it's a left brain, right brain thing. Maybe it's a kind of balance, but I actually really liked the work. I also did waitressing. I did everything I could in Oxford firstly to make money, but secondly to avoid having to do the academic work. I think it was was some kind of procrastination. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed it. It paid well, and so I still to this day have a day job that's in science, sustainability, things that I'm really quite passionate about, and that's where all the business stuff came in. Uh-huh. But I never stopped loving reading and writing, and I never stopped reading and writing. In fact, I did a lot more when I stopped doing it academically, which I found, really did stifle me. So I kept doing it, and I've been doing it all these years. You could say it's a hobby. You could say it's an immersive hobby. You could say it's a vocation, or you could say it's a, passion. But it's all of those things for me, and also not just the writing and the reading, but the whole community that surrounds those endeavors. I love it. I'm, immersed in it. It gives me outrageous joy. I feel incredibly privileged to have it. And I'm also grateful that I don't have to make a living out of it. So I can do the things that I like and for pleasure. So that's a potted history. But, history and Bobish is a great example of that. Is always, you pick where you start and you pick where you end. It's a selective creative process.
Well, you said, it could be a passionate hobby, but it sounds more like it is just an important part of your spirit, shall we say? And you're right. Sometimes with the science part, a lot of people sort of think of science as the opposite of something like literature and art, and I guess those sort of deeper themes. But for me, it's the actual opposite. I think science, when you delve into it, that's the magic. That's depending on which science you look into, it is unraveling these amazing mysteries of this, astoundingly strange universe that we find ourselves in. And, for me, it's just an eternal source of I guess, art and inspiration, and right down to just a leaf on the backyard, I think. But I'm also was so happy to hear you talk about the wonders of growing up in a household where there were books everywhere, because definitely I was lucky enough to be in a similar situation. And when you're, little tack up, every little book is a portal to these magic places, and having portals all around you it was just, amazing. And then discovering that, you could pick up a pencil and start creating your own little portals. That was also, amazing. So we do share something there in common, even though we're on different sides of the world at the time.
I totally agree, Darren. Absolutely. You've said it well.
Obviously, Magdalena, that poetry does make up a huge part of your work when it comes to writing. I was just curious, what is it about that particular form, the form of poetry, I guess the rhythm of poetry, that's managed to capture you so passionately? And what sort of themes do you explore in your poems? Because having a brief look at some of the titles and some of the contents, there's so much that ground that you cover. So is poetry give you that instant outlet to cover so much ground, or is it just the rhythm of the words that's captivated your heart? What brought you to poetry?
Yeah, look, firstly, it was really my first medium, and maybe it is for a lot of kids. It was, the way it's almost, again, the kind of underlying way I think. I have to work very hard, much harder, when I want to write something in prose, like a novel, because I don't normally think in those kinds of constructs. Even though I do think of story, my story brain, if you like, is often poetically inclined, let's say. But really what draws me to poetry, and what keeps drawing me to poetry, is the way in which it is able to engage with complexity. It doesn't fix a reality. Great prose does this too, I will say. And, and I don't know that maybe it's an artificial binary to separate poetry from prose in that sense. But the whole notion of poetry, whether it's in poetic prose or whether it's standing alone as a kind of book of verse, is really something that engages well with the complexity of existence. So you can have multiple realities happening simultaneously in poetry, which to my mind reflects reality and reflects experience, and my experience in particular, better than trying to have a more linear narrative where, you have a cause and then you have an effect. I love the way poetry enables that kind of multiplicity. I love the way it creates meaning in ways that are both semantic and non-semantic. And when I say non-semantic, I mean, yes, the rhythms, the way the words work on the page, the line breaks, the overall metaphors and the symbolism and the reference. And there are so many different elements to good poetry that create meaning in and of itself that doesn't have to be translated into a semantic meaning, but still hits and still makes sense and still works on a reader as meaning. So it's all those things that draw me to it.
Well, you put that extremely beautifully. And I think for me, poetry is definitely, I guess, musical in a sense, as opposed to, long literature prose. But also, I love the fact that with poetry, the sentence can change when you read the following. Like, you can read one sentence and then you jump to the next line, but that may change the meaning of the first line. And it's like this eternal dance. And it can be, it's almost like a three-dimensional hologram, some good poetry can be, because the meaning is not as concrete as it would be in, say, in a paragraph in a normal novel. it twists and changes as you read it, and then the pace you read it, the rhythm that you choose to read it changes it as well. So yeah, I think poetry is also not only a little bit musical, but almost captures that dividing line between dream and reality, I think, better than what a normal novel sort of prose can do.
Yes, and inside and outside, but also, and I think you just touched on this, Darren, this the way in which a poem can change and morph with each reading as well. So there is this kind of space, and it is a little bit of maybe it's a bit magical. There is this space between the work and the reader as well, where something new, something fresh is created.
Oh, it's absolutely magical. That's definitely that. I mean, the whole art of reading is we're sending our words into somebody else's mind. I think that always is just hugely strange and magic, and just adds to all the elements of the universe that kind of don't make sense, but in beautiful ways. But you're right. Poetry is something that I think is, for a lot of people, is their first journey into putting words down on page. And because there are no real rules for poetry, are there? You don't need to feel yourself constrained in the sense of doing a particular style of prose or following a particular set of literary rules. A poem can be whatever you want it to be, and that's that freedom to just write and just get things out is what's magic, I think, about poetry, and obviously brings a lot of magic to yours. But there is one thing I would like to have a quick chat about, and that is actually about one of your books called Sleep Before Evening. Mm-hmm. Just for the listeners out there, I'll just read the synopsis. And Sleep Before Evening is the story of a brilliant young woman who, after experiencing a death in the family, abandons the promise of her academic career for a desperate search within herself. Her new life is immersed in the dark side of New York, in all its squalor, booze, drugs, sex, violence, poetry, and original music. Despite the dangers, she braves the morass for its stimulating freedom and the opportunity to burrow underneath the layers of her life and uncover the inner pain that hurts so badly. Now, I think it goes without saying that probably the New York of today is a far cry from the New York of, let's say, the 1970s and 1980s. So I'm curious, how much of the author, Magdalena, is or can be found within the pages of Sleep Before Evening? And is it a bit of a love letter to your childhood home, or is it more of a reflection on finding oneself?
Oh, it's both. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's my first novel. So, and I was a little homesick when I wrote it. So, absolutely, there was a deep sense in me that this was a portal where I could get back to a place that no longer existed, which was, New York in the 1980s. So I could just go there and, mess around and have some fun with my writing without having to get on a plane or do any of the things that would be required. Besides, New York isn't, as you rightly said, New York of the 80s. So, New York is almost like a character. It was really very much a part of that book, but also a journey, as you say, to find oneself. The title, by the way, comes from Walter Pater's The Renaissance. And the line, I'll just read you the line because it's kind of the theme of the book, which is not to discriminate every moment, some passionate attitude in those about us, and in the very brilliancy of their gifts, some tragic dividing on their ways is on the short day of frost and sun to sleep before evening. So it's really about, art.
Lots to unravel there.
Yeah. It's a great quote, which I I came across when I was as an undergraduate in university. But yeah, it's, very much a coming of age novel, story about finding yourself. Oh, there's a lot of me in it, but in all of the characters. So I'm not any one particular character. In fact, when I wrote the book, there's a mother figure in it who's a little bit, she wasn't, Lily, the mother, she wasn't the best mother in the world. She was a little bit neglectful. She dealing with bipolarity, though I don't mention it. She's an artist, all sorts of things. And when I gave the book to my mother to read, I said, Mom, you're not the bad mother. I just want you to know that, right? Like, don't take it that way. And she read the book and she said, I know I'm not the bad mother. I am Marianne. I'm the protagonist. You wrote my life. I don't know how.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how you knew it, because this is something she actually physically went through. an addiction. It happened kind of in my first year, so I wasn't aware of it in any tangible sense.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, you've shockingly managed to capture everything that I felt, every aspect of my life. She said, I'm astonished that you did it, and grateful. So, yeah,
That's pretty incredible.
Weird things happen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, you mentioned that it was a little bit of a homesickness that inspired you to put together Sleep Before Evening, but maybe there was another little element digging away there, wanting to bring the story out.
Yes, maybe something that calls you, which is also what happened with Bobish. This sense of being almost drawn in by some force, some DNA force, let's say, saying, this, please write this story. It kind of calls to you, in that way that sometimes happens. And you don't know why you're being drawn into writing the story or why you can't stop, but sometimes it happens that way. And yes, of course, with Sleep Before Evening, it happened that way. And I will also say that the setting, maybe less so the characters, although there are some correspondences, but the setting itself, which I think I called it Sea Haven. It's been a while. But it was actually Long Beach, Long Island, which is a suburb of New York, where I was a teenager. So I did live in the setting, in that place, that the protagonist goes through what she goes through, in that era, which again is kind of 1983, I think. So that was all, the real setting of my life. One of the reasons I did that probably was just because it made it easier. So that I knew what I was writing about. It was easier for me to imagine something that I could visualize.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that New York in the 80s would be a very fertile ground for storytelling and adventures and experiences. And
yeah, I think it was rougher than it is today, Darren. I've gone back, and New York's it's a pretty different place to the grotty but also kind of funky city I grew up in.
Funky city you grew up in, but talking of different places, so from the hustle and bustle of the Big Apple, and then of course to the mountains and beaches of New South Wales. How did the decision come about to move to Australia? And of course, we're so glad you did. But when did that journey or the seeds of the idea of coming to the land down under begin?
Yeah, I guess it's a strange story, really. I mean, I went to Oxford to do my postgraduate degree. So I went to England. And that was kind of like, an English major's dream to study English at Oxford. And, I was really just like, Jude the Obscure, looking at the spires. I was in awe of the place. And, I actually tried for a Rhodes Scholarship in my last year. As an undergraduate, I was kind of encouraged to do that, but I had no sports whatsoever. I was very unsporty.
Okay.
I had good grades. I did pretty well. English came pretty easy for me, but I definitely did not have the sports. But then, having applied for it, I kind of began dreaming about it and thinking, maybe I could still do it. I don't need a Rhodes Scholarship to go to Oxford. And in fact, I got a full scholarship to do postgraduate in New York at Columbia. But even with the full scholarship and even with paying overseas rates, Oxford was still cheaper than going to an Ivy League in New York.
Oh, wow. There you go.
So I thought, well, why not? And then I got a scholarship to Oxford. It didn't pay the whole amount, but it paid the difference between being an overseas and a local student. So my actual fees for university were, significantly cheaper. But anyway, that's to get me to England. When I was in England, I kind of moved into a house with a person who then, ultimately became my husband.
Uh-huh.
And he is English, but his parents, who are also English, had migrated to Australia maybe 10 years prior. And he'd just come back from visiting them and was, a little bit under the spell of Australia. So we went back to the US for a little while. We knew we couldn't live in England at the time. They're cheaper now, but at the time, house prices were really cheap. We got married in England, but we knew we needed to leave. Just because it was just too expensive to live there. And, we wanted to buy a house. We wanted to find a place that was cheaper to live in. And I also was a little homesick. So we went back to the US for a bit, We went to North Carolina. Bizarre. I have no reason why. It seems like a strange place to go. Maybe if we'd gone to New York, we would have stayed. But we went to somewhere in the South, and it was a little odd and didn't really gel with either of us. I think actually, my husband wanted to study law at Duke University, which was near. It's in North Carolina. So there you go. There's my reason. But it didn't really gel. And we also applied for migration to Australia, and it took a year, but we did finally manage to get in on the point system back then. So we got points for everything it was hard, but we got points for just about everything you could get points for. I don't even know if they still do the point system, but we got in on the point system.
I don't think it's gotten any quicker. I know that much as far as getting
we got points for our degrees. We got points because my husband had family here, but ultimately I think he had done a teaching qualification, and that was enough to get us in. So we got in and we thought, why not? Let's just do it. I'd never even been to Australia, Darren, when I migrated.
Wow.
I'd just gone, having never been to the country. We migrated. It was like, it was in January in 1990. And we arrived, and I'm still here and love it. Just love it. I wouldn't live anywhere else. I mean, I feel enormous privilege to be living on a Wabaka land here on Lake Macquarie. It's so exquisite, so beautiful. I wrote some of Bobish. I literally went out into the woods. So we're in the Watergans. I went out into the woods and sat on a rock in the woods to do some of the writing, just so I could kind of pick up on the sounds and the smells and the feel of the rocks being in the moss beneath my hands. It just gave me that kind of sensual surrounding that I needed to do the kind of work I wanted to do in the book.
Well, and you've kind of already answered one of the questions I was going to have, and that is, has your new home inspired any new themes or explorations when it comes to your poetry? And by the sounds of it, just being in nature has been a source of inspiration. And it sounds like a beautiful moment to be able to just be sitting there and soaking in everything and letting those words come.
Yeah, look, I'm definitely a long way from New York City. I very much in the country where I live as well. It's quite rural. But, and I guess, I will always define myself in some aspect of my fiber as a city girl. I grew up in the city streets. But my dad had some land. I think he might still have it, just on the Canadian border in upstate New York. And we used to go there every summer. And I guess there's a kind of part of me as well that, really does feel quite at home, immersed in a natural environment as well. Again, it's like kind of two sides of the brain, like the science and the literature and the practical and the spiritual and, city and country, they're all there. And I wanted to engage in both of those things as well. And Bobish, I feel like I did do that.
Of course, Bobish is the reason that I would love to have a chat about. So, because obviously Sleep Before Evening, that's set in New York, and I understand Black Cow, your other novel, that features characters that journey from Sydney down to Tasmania.
Yes, very much an Australian book.
Yeah, but your brand new release, Bobish, it's a whole new form of exploration because I understand it is I guess one could say the incredible trials, tribulations and experiences of your great-grandmother. And I understand it's set against the ever-changing landscapes of New York during the 1920s, 30s and 40s. I can only imagine how incredible it must have been put together, some like what essentially sounds like an epic and in poetry form to boot. And not only that, but to explore a world through your great-grandmother's eyes or experiences. So when did the book first tap you on the shoulders and ask to be written? And how did you approach the research? And wow, how did it come about?
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. I mean, look, I've been trying to write about this and about really my grandparents and my great-grandparents. For a long time, I was trying to write a novel, and it just wasn't really working for me. I kept hitting a wall. It wasn't saying the things I wanted to say. It wasn't engaging in the way I wanted to engage, but I also couldn't let it go. And then, a friend of mine, wonderful friend of mine, said to me, just write a poem, just write, because I was telling her, like, this isn't going to work. I don't think this is working. She said, write a poem, and just see where you go with it. Just see where it takes you. And I wrote a poem, and it took me where I wanted to go. And I was like, oh, this came pretty easily. And it's just what I want to say. And it's the right tone and it's the right form. And so from that point on, I began working with poetry, but also did a lot of research. So a lot of research online, a lot of research, through like various databases, family search, ancestry, heritage, there's a whole heap of them, libraries. I was drawn in by the photo that became the cover. I found it amongst my mother's things, and I took the photo, and I couldn't stop staring at it. It just drew me in, and I didn't know why, but I knew that something was calling me to tell Rebecca's story. That Rebecca's story was pivotal in some ways. To this kind of collective trauma, the trauma, my people, the Jews, my family. There was so many things that I guess I grew up kind of knowing and not knowing about Rebecca. And I was very close with my grandmother, who was Rebecca's daughter, Eve. And I never met Rebecca myself, Rebecca Lieberman. She's my Bobish. She's the subject of the book. I never met her, but I was so close to my grandmother. And my grandmother used to sing to me in Yiddish. And somehow that's what I felt myself drawn to. So I just kept working in it and writing and working and writing. And it started to take shape. And then I was at a writers' conference, and I went to it was like a group book launch for Puncher and Watman, and I went and I started chatting to Ed Wright, who is one of the people who runs Puncher and Watman, one of the owners, and Ed said, "So what are you working on?" And I told him about Bobish, and he said, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. Send it to me, when you're ready. No rush." And that's it. I didn't have to go into a general, thank goodness, a kind of general open call out, because last time they did that, they got 200 people sending manuscripts. I just kept working on it until I felt it was good enough to send it. And then I had a mandate, so I worked on it harder, and it just took shape.
That is, that's pretty unreal, actually, isn't it? That you're drawn to the story, but then the journey from pen to publishing, it was almost written in stone, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I feel now. I mean, I've been, it has touched some readers, and they've been very, reviewers and things like that have been, very positive about the book, and I almost feel like it's a gift, it's a gift from Rebecca to me, this story. Again, I grew up with some of the mythologies around the book. So things like the fact that she worked in the ill-fated Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which was it was probably one of the biggest industrial accidents in United States history. 147 women died, mostly migrants.
Oh,
many of them, the factory burned down. Many of them just jumped out the window, like they did in 9/11, to their deaths. It was horrific, and the doors were locked. It was awful. And there was a lot of fabric, so there was a lot of material to combust. But what that accident gave rise to was major industrial reform throughout the U.S. But we knew, my family knew, it was one of those many family mythologies that, all families grow up with some mythologies. And one of them in mine was that she worked at the factory when the fire happened, but that she did not go to work that day for whatever reason. And the other mythology was that she kind of was, my grandmother used to call her a Didakai or a gypsy. I know we don't use those terms anymore, but she was kind of known for tea leaf reading and telling the future. My grandmother used to say that she was prescient, and that also my grandmother used to say she was prescient, that she could kind of get a sense of the future. She could see in the future. So I wanted to play with those ideas. They were fun things to play with. There was material there. Not to mention the fact that when I started researching, and also, I guess one other thing, I started researching and I realized that, she left the Pale of Settlement, which was kind of a ring-bound area in Eastern Europe. It included modern-day Poland, Belarus, Lithuania, Russia. It's a whole range of areas in Eastern Europe that was kind of ring-bound that the Jews could not leave. Those were the shtetls that formed the basis of, for example, Fiddler on the Roof, those little villages. As she left to go to the U.S. At the age of 14 on her own. So, it was quite the story. So I had all of those things that were drawing me into the story, but maybe the one biggest catalyst was my daughter was doing her HSC in history. She was very into it. And she started asking me questions. She was studying, the Russian Revolution. And she said to me, did your great-grandmother, who you've been researching, did Rebecca live during the time of Tsar Nicholas II? And I said, oh, yes, she did. So I started to connect the dots, and I realized, that this was a really pivotal story in history. It was the Tsar Nicholas and his waning power that he sanctioned the Black Hundreds, which, kind of began and were quite pivotal in the pogroms that drove the Jews out of Eastern Europe. So, the more I started to look into it, the more I realized that this was not just a personal story. It was a personal story that bisected big historical events.
And something that I think, should always be kept alive. And I have to admit, I'm quite jealous. I've brought it up once or twice on the podcast. So my father's side, so my grandmother, essentially escaped from, or she was at one point she was in a camp over there in Poland or somewhere near there, and then my mother's side was Dutch, but she was during the war and then came over. So, but I never got to learn much about the history from either side. More a case of it wasn't spoken about, especially on my father's side. And of course, it's only of late that I wish I knew more, and I wish I knew how to even begin the process of researching, which of course I wouldn't even know where to start. I've lost most of my family now, so I don't have anyone to talk to. So where do you begin with when it came to your research? Did you just go by gut feeling and start working it out, or did you have some advice as to what sort of tools are available today for people that might want to learn more about the history of their family and, like you said, to discover where they may have been in important landmarks of time and society?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Darren. I'm finding that a lot of people, when they read the book, and this is again a kind of unexpected gift, really, are saying, I have a story and I didn't know how to approach it, and now I do. So thank you. And there are so many stories out there that absolutely deserve to be explored and written, but also, and this was not entirely. It was the same for me. Let me put it that way. That one of the tragedies of life is that we don't really care much about our history and our family story. Maybe not everyone, but certainly it was the case for me. I didn't care at all. And it wasn't spoken about when I was young enough and people were alive to ask those questions. I didn't, my great-grandmother, I did know my great-grandmother on my grandfather's side. I didn't know, Rebecca died before I was born, but my grandmother on my grandfather's side, Mama Yetta, I did know her, and she was kind of bitter and she didn't talk much. So we didn't bring it up. She didn't say, we didn't bring it up. We knew that there was some trauma there related firstly to the pogroms and then to the Holocaust, but nobody spoke about it. My grandfather he was in World War II, but he never talked about his experiences. We all sensed, this was a no-go area. And I didn't, and, maybe had I begun to talk about it sensitively with him, he would have opened up, but I didn't want to know. I didn't want to go there. I was busy, thinking about myself, as young people often do. So it was only much later, but, my grandmother, Eve, who, again, I was extremely close to, she had already passed away. My mother had passed away. So, there weren't that many people I could go to, but I did find people. And I asked a lot of questions of those people. So I found, the two oldest grandchildren, of Rebecca who had known her. And I I made contact. I'd never spoken to them before, but I made contact and I interviewed them many times. And they were lovely. They were very helpful. They didn't remember much, but, they remembered enough to give me material and to give me flavor, which is really all I needed at that point. My aunt and my uncle, neither of them knew Rebecca. Again, she died young, and she died before they were born. But my aunt Susan, who is a writer, did know Rebecca. She loved Rebecca when she was young. She lived with her for a little while with my grandmother while my grandfather was away at war. And she wrote about her. She's a writer as well, Susan Gordon-Lyden, and she wrote about her in her memoir, Take the Long Way Home. So I had that as a source as well. In fact, it was her who used to call Rebecca Bobish. And so that's where the name came from, which is I guess maybe it's a mispronunciation of Bobby, which is Yiddish for grandmother. But that's what she called her, Bobish, and that's what she became known as. And that's why I titled the book that way. So there were clues, there were little pieces of information. And what I would say, in answer to your question finally, is that, you have to start somewhere. You just have to start somewhere. So Ancestry.com is a great place to start, or Family Search. FamilySearch.com is this amazing database. It's all free, and it's run by the Mormons. Because the Mormons believe that you can actually go back retrospectively and you can save people who are dead by finding them.
Oh, that's very interesting.
It's an unusual belief, but it's just a fantastic database, and it's been well researched, and it's, as I say, it's completely free, unlike Ancestry, where you can do a little bit on it free, but not much. But you just go there and you begin with a name, you begin with a clue, you begin with something. And what happens is you get more clues as you go along. There are hints, there are connections, there are other people whose trees exist. And little by little, it takes a lot of time. It's like a huge time suck. But sometimes, 5 hours have gone by and you're like, oh my God, what have I been doing? I've been lost on this journey. But little by little, you kind of build up the picture. But I will also say, and this is another reason why I chose verse, and this is another, I guess, something that I will say to people who are doing it, is that you're just not going to get a clean historical narrative. There will be gaps. There will 100% be gaps. So there's lots of material, surprising amounts. In the US, for example, there were census documents, and there was a 1910 census. The story actually begins in 1907. So it's 10, 20s, 30s, 40s. But, there are census documents that start from 1910 and go right up to 1950. You can find those census documents, and they will list members of a household and their ages and their occupations. And that information probably exists in other countries as well. So there's that. There's all sorts of documents. Once you find somebody on a census, then you find the hidden brothers or cousins or, other people that you never knew about or who might have died early. So you get these clues and you just start to build it up. But I also wanted to engage with what I didn't know. I wanted to put myself in the story and my search in the story, and also the gaps. I didn't want to pretend that I knew things that I didn't. I wanted the gaps. I read something last week, Sophie Strand, whose Substack I follow, which is a really wonderful writer. And she wrote, meaning is found in the interstices. I'm probably misquoting that, but something like that. Meaning is found in the interstices. And I think in those gaps, it's in those gaps that, you can kind of find these people and find something about them and find meaning. Maybe it comes from yourself. I don't know. But it feels like you can fill the gaps with empathy and understanding.
You've definitely added a whole new level of inspiration for me personally, should I say, to begin that journey to look into researching. Because you're right, growing up, the history of my family, I wasn't interested in. I was, like I said, I was focused on myself and, those opportunities that maybe if I could go back in time with the very limited wisdom that I have today, back to when I was a teenager, or when I had those opportunities to possibly ask and learn a little bit more. Yeah, there may have been discoveries to be made, but I didn't. And those discoveries remain not maybe forever, but for the moment, they remain hidden and mysterious. I know my grandmother did tell me once out of nowhere, she spent about 5 minutes telling me about her experience in the camp and a little bit about the horrors over there. I think just because she just needed me to know. We were literally talking about something completely different. And it was a really strange moment in time and something I'll never forget. But I do like the idea of, today's technology means we can, utilize things like websites to start looking. And I also really like the idea, or you mentioned earlier in the podcast about being possibly drawn towards certain stories by, almost like from a DNA perspective. And I think that is something that I've come to really appreciate over time. And that is that, the journey, there's my journey, of course, in life, but then, of course, there is the journey of all those people before me that led to me being here. Exactly. And suddenly that's becoming really important and for the moment, at least for me, something that is unknown and yet to be discovered. But I think it's too easy to forget that, to use DNA as an analogy, our journey is also the journey of all those before us that have brought us to where we are.
Exactly. And, I also wanted to engage with the levels. Well, firstly, let me say not knowing about trauma doesn't mean it didn't happen. And not knowing the trauma doesn't mean that it's not impacting on you in some way, and that it's not a legacy that in some ways was handed down. And I find that engaging with it, really facing up to it, in some ways, I won't say it doesn't change the past, it doesn't make it not happen. But in some ways, it has a kind of end the cycle impact, I find, to really open that door, put sunlight on it, and just say, I see you, I feel you, I understand you. And engaging with that. My great-grandfather, he's kind of the antagonist in the book. He wasn't a nice man. Simon Sandberg was his name. I don't refer to him by name in the book at all, in Bobish. I call him the fish smoker, which is what his profession was. And my mother used to call him the monster. He had a terrible alcohol problem. He was an addict, an alcoholic, and he was, fairly violent as well. So he wasn't nice, and he was a bit abusive, certainly to Rebecca. I'm sure to my grandmother, she never spoke of him. But so I went into the book thinking of him as the antagonist. That was another kind of story, was the story of that abuse. And what surprised me was that I also found his trauma. I found empathy for him. Again, it doesn't change the brutality. It doesn't change what he did, but I kind of found the man and what he had also lost and the trauma that he had also experienced and how the kind of truncation of his own beauty or, even that toxicity that he took on board in order to enable him to kind of do the work that he hated and live the life that he hated. That in itself made me feel some empathy for him. And I even have a poem in which I kind of allow myself to go visit him and meet him. and I feel like I've forgiven him. And I feel like by doing that, it kind of ends the secret threads of trauma that continue to impact on us today.
Isn't it such a profound, I guess, understanding or realization, discovery, whatever word might be useful there, when one can look at a person and I guess apply a little bit of perspective in the sense of, because, I know there is a scientific, field out there that does, tend towards believing that elements of our ancestry, whether it be trauma or certain aspects of the life lived, do continue to shape us even on a subconscious or unconscious level. And yes, I think I've seen it myself with a member of my family, who was a very rough man. But then, as I did learn a little bit, then you see that what you're seeing sometimes is a person, what's left after perhaps things have been stolen from that person, experiences that they never got to have or experiences they should never have had that they've had. And so, yeah, it's very interesting that you talk about, a character that was, an evil character, so to speak. But then as you delve into it a little bit more, is it the remnants of a great man that have, that life has shaped, cut, molded, and broken. It's such a different way of looking at people, isn't it? Sometimes when you try and think, that person is a horrible person, is there a reason for that? And
yes, another reason for poetry as well, because the horror and the beauty can sit together. You don't have to resolve it.
No, it's a dance. Yeah, absolutely. Part of the dance. Well, I guess the question that comes from all of that, and the experiences that you got to go on, I guess the Magdalena of today is the Magdalena of today different from the Magdalena prior to writing Bobish? And if so, what sort of changes do you think, or inspirations, or belief systems, or the understanding of the world around you? Do you think anything's changed from writing the book?
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, yes. I think every book that I write changes me, and Bobish maybe more so than any book I've written. But I don't know how I could put that into words exactly, at least in a way that wouldn't sound, maybe a little too woo-woo from my taste.
Woo-woo is good. Woo-woo is always good.
I do feel that I feel more open. I feel as if I've opened a bit into the past, and I feel more receptive. I feel calmer. I feel kind of joy and calm, and I feel lots of positive things, and I feel every time that somebody reads Bobish and is touched by the book that there is another element of connection. Connection is probably the best word. I feel connected, right? I feel connected in a very positive way to who I am, and maybe as a result, happier.
Oh, it's
probably the best I can do.
Beautiful way to put it, yeah. And I suspect also your position in time must change a little as you become more familiar with your ancestry, I guess, and the journeys that led to where you are. I can imagine that your place in the universe, your place in time, has expanded somewhat, and perhaps the journey that you're on now suddenly has become so much more important and so much more expansive.
Yeah, I agree, Darren. Another thing I wanted to engage with in Bobish, and something obviously the whole climate emergency. A lot of my writing up until now, has been focused around, let's say, eco-poetics, and really engaging with the beautiful environment that I'm surrounded in. Like everybody else, I had to evacuate, and I was impacted by the bushfires. I'm very conscious of, I guess, the both the beauty and its delicacy at this very point in time. How much is reliant on what we do now. In terms of the kind of future we're going to get. And I really wanted to engage with, I guess, what are the impacts of those traumas on where we are now, and how can we move forward? How can we connect? And again, it comes back to that sense of connection, and that sense of connecting with the earth, that sense of connecting with the world around us, with the creatures and the plants and the whole environment that we're sitting in. When I sat on my rock and I, tried to connect with my past, also tried to connect with the layers of trauma that were pre-existing in New York when Rebecca arrived. I mean, she didn't arrive to, an empty land. She arrived to a land where there had already been trauma that was built. Its great industry in New York was built on the unceded lands of the Lenape, so another, native peoples who were displaced, and also, of course, the whole legacy of slavery that underpins, everything that is the U.S. today. And so all of those things, didn't engage very directly in those things, but I did want to make sure that I also didn't treat the trauma that she was undergoing as an isolated event, that, these oppressions are, and were in her case, politically motivated. The Black Hundreds and the pogroms were politically motivated. And, the oppressions that continued to happen, through World War I and World War II in particular, were also politically motivated. There were advantages to be gained by oppressing these people. And there continue to be advantages to certain groups in oppressions and in utilizing the spoils of the earth and taking, and all of these things I felt were connected. And I wanted to engage with that connection, with those links, with what do these things mean in as broad a sense as possible.
And of course, I'm sure you'll agree that it's by doing, taking on a challenge like that and trying to encompass all the facets of the, I guess, the scape, the political situation, the human situation, the suffering, the trauma, all those things. It's, I think, within these intimate books and intimate reflections that hopefully we can still hold on to some sort of ember, some sort of jewel that possibly moving forward we can actually learn from the past. I'm not 100% confident we're learning from the past, and I'm also not 100% confident that the true history, that lays behind us is being maintained accurately or honestly, especially when everything can be so easily changed, altered now.
I know what you mean, Darren, but I also feel so strongly that connection and community and thinking in communal terms, thinking about, where we sit in the overall ecosystem and how connected we all are, how connected everything is, has got to be the answer. And those are First Nation ways of thinking. So, there are answers. We have to open ourselves to them.
Yeah, and I 100% agree that I think our connection with the planet is definitely something that I hope will become, something that grows and grows as far as a philosophy and way of life for all of us moving forward. Just the last couple of days, I've had the pleasure of diving down in the reef, which is just around the corner from us. You dive down, you've got spectacular, all sorts of beautiful fish and crabs and stingrays, but just being under there is, when I try and talk to people who have never done it, and to try and it's very difficult to put in words that sense of, it's amazing. There's something that happens to your brain when you are suddenly just in there with nature. And yeah, nature can be definitely dangerous too. No two ways about it. But there's that moment where, yeah, it's I call it spiritual, call it almost a religious thing, I guess, to the point. But you're right, being aware of that relationship that is waiting for us to have with the world around us. I hope that is going to be the savior of and lead us into a future where we don't make so many mistakes, especially when it comes to political mistakes that always result in heartache for so many people. So yes, I think if we could all go for a dive on a reef or go sit on a rock and feel the moss a little bit more, then the world may just become a better place. Now, on a bit more of a practical side of things, when it comes to writing, you obviously do quite a lot. Do you have a particular approach? For example, are you the kind of writer that strikes when the lightning is the brightest, or are you a bit more methodical? Do you set timers? What's your general approach when it comes to writing?
Yeah, look, I my day job is pretty full. I work full time. I have 3 children as well, although they are now all adults. But I did all of my writing through their childhood as well. So I never really had the luxury of having, a special writing space or routines or, rituals that would get me into the writing mode. I kind of had to do what I could when I could in kind of stolen moments, or, generally speaking, I will do most of my writing in the evening. I'm a morning person too, so it may not be my best time, but I do most of my writing sort of, when the day is done and say my husband would put on the TV, or, we just kind of finish dinner, and then I would sit down and out comes the laptop and I'd, pick something to work on and I'd begin working.
Oh.
And I might, work for an hour or so. But I have also been known to, pull my car over on the side of the road and scribble something
really?
down. I've been known to say, Siri, take a note. I've been known to, to scribble on the back of, of a PowerPoint presentation that I printed out. If something comes to mind, I will, kind of try and capture it however and wherever I am. And sometimes that's in some pretty funky places. But for the most part, most of my writing is just me sitting on the sofa on my laptop of an evening.
Well, it sounds like a perfect finish to the day, really. You get to enjoy the jewels of literature after a day of, by the sounds of it, a job that you enjoy as well. So what a perfect day and perfect evening.
Yes, it's a nice release too.
Yeah.
If there is a problem that I've had during the day that I haven't been able to resolve, I can play with it in poetry.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, the three-dimensional DNA verses that you can look at from a few different angles.
I won't say I've had the odd poem about a spreadsheet, but
Now, what about when it comes to some writing tips? So I'm just curious, across your literature journey or your writing journey, have you stumbled across any writing tips that you've learned that you wish you could have known at the start?
Yeah, sometimes, I look back at when I was at university, before I had kids, before I was working full time, and I think, what was I doing? Where did the time go? Why didn't look, I would just say, don't be too precious. Don't be too precious. Don't be too judgmental. I know that every writer, I don't care what level they're at, has imposter syndrome. You've got to write bad stuff or you'll never write good stuff. So I would just say, muck in, expect it to be bad, go easy on yourself, and acknowledge that if you're not doing it at all, it's only through doing it, that you actually kind of get to where you need to go. You may not even know how or what you're going to write about, or how you're going to get to that end point. I'm certainly not a plotter. I'm much more of a pantser. So I usually don't know with a poem in particular where I'm going with it, other than maybe some basic concept that I'm working with. So it's only through really messing around and writing bad stuff that I ultimately get to something that is closer and, closer to what I want to say. So I just say, we all start off bad. Just get in there and do it, and try as best as you can to turn off that judgmental mind.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. You got to play with the bad. You got to have fun with the bad. The bad, every bad word you put down is a little brick that forms perhaps a stairway or a solid foundation for the good stuff.
Also, Darren, trust your own story. It's hard. I walked around for years going, I have nothing interesting to say. And, I think everybody has that narrative, or lots of people have that narrative. Well, who am I to write a story? But, trust that every story is unique. We are all the unique combination of circumstances that mean that we're here. Often there are incredible coincidences or incredible, last minute, going left instead of going right, that leads up to how we get to this moment. And everybody has their own unique perception and way of seeing it. So, I guess also trust that your story is worthwhile. Definitely
trust these stories worthwhile. And definitely trust the fact that each of us have a story to tell. We've all had something happen in our lives. Like you said, if we're alive, we've made it this far, there's definitely been something along the way that is always, worthy of maybe reflection. And so for potential authors out there, start on the bad stuff. Don't think you haven't got a story, because everybody's got a story. And but yours has been an absolutely fascinating one. So, but what about the future stories? What super adventures do you have planned for 2023? Yeah, look,
I'm still, I guess, casting out nets to decide on what my next big project will be. I've been writing and submitting poems, even had a couple of short listings and even won something. But I'm not quite sure what the big project's going to be, other than to say I'm fairly sure that it will be ecological in some way, shape, or form, and probably will involve some ecosystem like trees or bodies of water or something along those lines. I think I will probably, I'm continuing to research my family history, by the way. I haven't lost that bug. My daughter very wonderfully got me an ancestry subscription for Christmas. And so I'm continuing to do it and find things out, but I don't know that I'll write another historical book. I think I'm going to do something, ecological next, but I'm still not that sure yet. Things are starting to form, but they're still a little bit inchoate.
Sounds like it might be time to just take a few nice hikes along the beaches or
Yes.
out in the mountains, and let nature guide you to whichever decision that's going to be needed. But
Oh, yes. I have to get back up onto
sounds
the reef
perfect.
again, because I there's nothing like being underwater with a snorkel amongst that outrageous beauty.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Barrier Reef, of course, is a stunning place, but any reef, you can, if you're lucky enough to be near a reef, it is just it can just, everything melts away when you're under there, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
There's no time for reflections of bad days or problems that need resolving. None of that. It all just goes, it's gone, poof, like magic. And just suddenly you're in this complete, realm of just utter inspiration. So I think I'll be joining you. I may be going for a snorkel this afternoon, depending on if there's waves or not.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, but where can readers discover all about you and listen to your podcast, and of course, most important of all, where can they purchase your books?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is just at my website. I've got like kind of a compendium there, if you like, of everything that I'm doing, Compulsive Reader, the podcast, all of my books are there with links. So that's just magdalenaball.com. So it's, MagdalenaBall.com. That's the easiest way to find me. But if you're in Australia, I would say the best place to get the book is directly from the publisher. They're amazing. They're a small publisher, Puncher and Watman, but it's, Puncher, Puncher, and A-N-D, Watman, WATTMANN.com. And if you just type in Bobish there, you'll go straight to my book page. And that is a really good way of getting hold of the book. Their customer service is, by all accounts, brilliant. It's as good a way as any, but there are links to that as well on my website.
Excellent. And did I read something about if you purchase through the publisher, you're happy to send, is it autograph or?
Oh yeah, I can do that. I mean, if you buy a copy of the book, it doesn't matter where you buy it from. If you buy a copy of the book and you you can go to my website and contact me, I'm more than happy to send out. I've got these beautiful book plates, and I'm more than happy to send you out an autographed book plate with, some bookmarks as well. So just hit me up and I'll post those out directly, and I can sign it with whatever you want.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I haven't heard too many authors do anything like that. So that's super cool.
Yeah. And also, if you have a book club and you decide you want to read Bobish, and I will say, just by way of a bit of promo, that, I know there are a number of book clubs, because I've heard from them, that are really keen to get into poetry, for reasons I don't understand entirely. Poetry is hot right now, but they don't know how, and they want to get into poetry through, some medium that's easy for them to get into. They're a little daunted. I would say Bobish is a great place to start, because it is memoir. There is quite a narrative trajectory. It is more or less sequential. You can follow Rebecca's story. It's not hard to follow at all. But it is still poetry. And so I would be more than happy, if your book club is reading it, or you decide you want to do it with your book club, to join in person if you happen to be in Newcastle or even Sydney, or Central Coast, of course. Anywhere where I can get to within about 2 hours, I will come. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to Zoom in and give a talk and do a reading. There's no charge for that.
That is absolutely outstanding. And I dare say that there's going to be quite a few listeners that are either part of a book club, or at least know someone who is in a book club. So possibly you may be getting quite a few emails or requests to be a part of the book club. And definitely, if you can help bring people into their poem or poetic, shall we say, journey, what a beautiful gift and what a beautiful opportunity for new writers out there to learn from someone who has just done such amazing things with her poetry.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, look, I love connecting with readers. It's it's kind of the biggies, right? It's it's the real joy that comes out of creating a book.
And it's been an absolute real joy for the opportunity to chat with you today, Magdalena. So I just want to say thank you so much for revealing so many things about yourself, about the journeys from New York to New South Wales, about your great-grandmother, about, the research, about, your love, your passion for poetry, and, what makes it so special. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been such a wonderful experience.
Thank you so much for having me, Darren. It's been a joy. I really appreciated being on the show.
Absolute pleasure. I wish you nothing but the best for 2023. And please do let us know when you've come to a decision. And we'd love to have you in the Writers' Lounge to chat about what I'm hoping will be an eco-poetry mission coming soon.
Yes, thank you. I'll let you know as soon as I come to a decision about that and, have something that looks a little like a manuscript. In the meantime, thank you so much. And good luck with your story. I'm sure you'll find out more if you start digging.
I am actually going to look at a couple of websites today. You have 100% inspired me, and I think it's time. And you've got to take those little signs from the universe when they pop up, and I would definitely say this is a little sign from the universe. So I would be a fool to not, utilize this technology and computer sitting right in front of me to actually start doing something that I should have been doing a long time ago. But in the meantime, thank you so much. Take care. We definitely hope for the pleasure of chatting again soon.
Thanks, Darren.
Magdalena Ball and Bobish, thank you so much for being so generous with your chat to Darren, and really interesting way to express yourself through long form poetry.
Yes, Magdalena, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. And of course, I hope we have many reasons to chat again on the podcast in the near future. But yeah, it was, as you could tell, it was like there was so much to cover and so many interesting experiences and outlooks on life and, the literature itself that was, made for a really cool interview. And one of those amazing things that we get the opportunity to do thanks to the wonderful listeners and wonderful authors as part of the podcast. But you're right, the long form poems is something that I have to admit I've forgotten how special they can be. And perhaps even so how important they've been in our history too, and as far as literature when it comes to you could essentially say Shakespeare to a certain degree as well. Well, that's right. But
even earlier, the Greeks sort of said the Aeneid, the Odyssey, and the Iliad, all those kind of things. So it made me think a little bit more about poetry. I used to write quite a lot of poetry. That was one of the ways that I, express thoughts and feelings, which is good. And of course, there's lots of benefits of poetry. Language skills and building vocabulary and creative thinking and self-awareness, and it's therapeutic and expands your worldviews. But I was really thinking, because we look at readers and writers, that the basic elements of poetry, and just reminded myself of some of those things. So you have metre, rhyme, scheme, verse, and stanza. So these are kind of some structural elements that you don't have to follow, but you can. So metre is the pattern of beats in a line of poetry. So it's the combination of how many beats there are and the arrangement of stresses. For an example is, 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. So the pattern is unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed. So 'twas the night before Christmas. So they call that apparently an anapest, which I think is really an interesting thing. So that it's got its whole other language and structure and form. Now, a rhyme scheme is the pattern of sounds that repeats at the end of a line or a stanza. So the rhyme scheme, the schemes can change line by line, stanza by stanza, or they can continue throughout the poem. So if you think twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up over the world so high, like it ain't in the sky. So that's the rhyme scheme. And for writers, just know that a stanza is the opposite of paragraph, whereas verse is considered to be the opposite of prose. And a stanza is a group of lines in a poem, but the term verse has many meanings in poetry. Verse can refer to a single metrical line, stanza, or the poem itself. And this is the main difference between stanza and verse. And of course, I always remember, for some weird reason, the whole thing about iambic pentameter. And you mentioned Shakespeare. And so iambic pentameter is a type of metric line, as we've just heard what metre is. It's the pattern of beats used in traditional English poetry and verse drama. And of course, Shakespeare. So the term describes the rhythm, or the metre, established by the words in that line. And rhythm is measured in small groups of syllables called feet. So there you go.
kind of, really brings out the intricacies that can be found in the poem, doesn't it?
It's not just throw stuff on a page.
No.
Of course you can throw stuff on a page, but, if you sort of break it down into all the bits and pieces, there is that kind of rhythm. So, there you go.
I like to think of, on one hand, certain forms of poetry as really intricate jazz, with the different beats and in the sense that, jazz is such a difficult musical medium, and realistically only the very best of best musicians can play it, and you kind of have to know every trick and rule there is just before you can even think about breaking the rules and writing jazz.
Yes, because then they go off on, the best jazz is that just kind of spontaneous, throw to this person, throw to that person, and they just ignore the rules and do what they want. So I think poetry can be very much like that.
Obviously, I wrote, not obviously, but I did write a lot of poetry when I started writing, and the beautiful thing about it is it can be, you can have an emotion, a thought, an idea, a bubble, and you can get a poem out, and then you've captured that thought bubble. As opposed to short story novels, you work on it, you build on it, and that's quite a process. But and so is long form poetry, and it can be as intricate as one wishes it to be. But there's also that unique ability, to capture a thought in a verse or in a short poem, and that may be the equivalent of a note for later for something bigger, or it can be a unique piece of literature on its own. There's a magic, I think, to the idea that something, because poetry, I think, is one of its like hidden majesties, for me at least, is its ability to catch real fleeting concepts or fleeting little observations, like things that sort of can sprinkle in and out of life in the blink of an eye. And I think from my perspective anyway, if I wanted to write a poem, it's that ability to, if I see something really, something that touches me or excites me, or something where I just want to quickly capture that one thought that popped in my head, or that one feeling, I can do it with a poem, and then it's there forever. Really, it's been captured in words. It's captured this fleeting little dance of a shadow, out of the corner of my eye. Now I've got it, and it's in there like a beautiful butterfly on display. Although I would never kill a butterfly.
No,
no. Do you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas you've got to put a lot of thought. That sounds funny to say. You got to put a lot of thought when you want to do a short story or a thing. I mean, there's that that difference between working on a classical piece versus jazz. You've got to also let your spirit run free too with the words sometimes. So that's the relationship I have with poetry, because I have not endeavoured it yet, and I'm assuming it would be a huge mountain to climb to try and tell a huge story in poetry format, let alone trying to celebrate and share the the highs and lows and trials and tribulations of someone's life in long form poetry, which is just a monumental task. It is a huge
thing, and of course I did mention last time, I think, that I was reading Evelyn Aralewin's Drop Bear, and that in reality, despite it being a small book and having separate poetry, and they're in all sorts of forms, some rhyming, some kind of short story almost, it is telling all the elements, a lot of the elements of her life. And it's just, it is vulnerable and angry and, bittersweet and happy and, lots of different things in there. And it is just incredibly powerful to read, I think, poetry.
And if there's one thing, a lot of, I don't know if it's just the way I've been drawn to certain types of poetry when I do read it, but to wind a full circle back to the discussions about that, the idea, the concept of bittersweet. I think poetry has almost a unique and proprietary way of going into those bittersweet moments, and sometimes really unraveling and revealing the beauty and majesty, I guess, of what is often pain.
Absolutely. You just have to read sort of anything by Maya Angelou, or listen to anything by Leonard Cohen, and they absolutely capture that bittersweetness in their art.
Well, speaking of bittersweet, we are slowly coming to the end of episode 79.
Indeed.
But the bitter part is that it'll eventually end, but the sweet part is before that, we get a chance to kick back in the writer's lounge and enjoy a beverage or two and have a chat with a special guest. So
Yes.
after it's been so much fun so far, and let's keep the fun going and have a bevy and catch up with a few people.
Book lovers, do we have a treat in store for you today? We are super delighted, Darren and I, to be inviting a guest down to the Writers' Lounge. So I think I'm going to dive in, and it's a cold day down here in Melbourne, so I'm going to opt for a glass of red wine. I think maybe a nice Tempranillo, which my niece has introduced me to. What about you, Darren? What have you got in your glass?
Well, we've got the sunsets are coming a bit earlier nowadays, and which is a bit sad. But so I'm going to maybe order a tequila sunrise in the hope of generating some virtual warmth.
Virtual warmth is good.
Yeah. So, but what about our special guest? Well, I wonder what she's
in
drinking.
A much warmer place, really, than you would imagine. So, really delighted to welcome to the Writers' Lounge, Kate Foster. Hello, Kate.
Hello, and it very much is hot and humid and sticky and unpleasant here today. Lots of rain, so I'm going for something very refreshing in my glass. I think I'm just going to go with a Bellini, just a simple, nice peach Bellini for me.
Lovely.
Bubbles all the way.
Bubbles are good. Bubbles are good. Now, for listeners who don't know Kate, although I can't imagine why you wouldn't know Kate, Kate is one of our fabulous Australian authors. She writes beautiful books for children. Pause and The Bravest Word, out with Walker Books, of course, and two coming up books, Harriet Hound and The Unlikely Heroes Club. So there's a lot happening in your writing life, Kate.
Yes, very busy at the moment, but loving every minute of it. It's Harriet is my first younger fiction, so I'm thoroughly enjoying going a bit younger and being sillier, I suppose.
And the youngies do like being silly, but that is, of course, not all that you do. You've got a new initiative happening, so tell us about Author Pen Pals.
So Author Pen Pals is something that I've set up with my lovely friend Dee White, which hopefully everybody knows that name as well, because she is a very prolific, fantastic author.
Yes, indeed.
And also just an incredibly supportive and lovely person. So big cheer for Dee, because she is just such a fantastic mentor to so many new and upcoming writers. So together we set up Author Pen Pals, which we started it last year and launched it this year, and basically it is an old-fashioned pen pal initiative where we pair up either an author or an illustrator from Australia with a school or a class within a school in Australia. So and over the course of the school year they write to each other. So we ask that they send one postcard or letter per term minimum, and then the kids get to respond as a class or individually, or through their teacher or group leader, and it's all old-fashioned post, so it's something physical and tangible to hold, and so it's just the idea of the program really is to just reach many children in schools and locations across the country who wouldn't ordinarily get the chance to meet an author. So the idea of the program was to kind of get lots of schools in remote, rural locations, in disadvantaged areas, so that they can have that opportunity to talk and meet a real life author through the magic of the written word, get inspired to pick up new books that they recommend, and vice versa as well. Children are just the inspiration authors like myself need. Meeting kids every day just inspires you to keep making up new stories and just feeding that love of literacy.
That is fantastic. What a brilliant idea. And where did it come from? Who got the little spark?
Well, I'd love to say it was completely my idea and I made it all up, but I am part of a very similar initiative over in the UK called Book Pen Pals, which was started about 5 years ago, I think, by two teacher librarians. I believe that's what they are. And it was probably a more simpler initiative, and it was just to send a postcard with a book recommendation, and that was kind of it. So really it was just to share new books that were coming out or books that the author loved with a class of children. So it's just a pleasure to write to those kids. I've had so much fun penning these letters and these postcards to the children and hearing back from them where they design or illustrate book covers for me and ask me lots of questions. Do you like baked beans? That kind of thing.
Very important question.
Well, I think so.
And this is the answer. Do you love baked beans?
I don't mind baked beans. I prefer spaghetti,
no
if I'm honest. Alphabetti spaghetti, obviously being a writer. So yeah, that's kind of how the programme works over in the UK. And I just thought, what an amazing thing to bring to Australia, particularly the country is just so vast, and there are so many kids in these communities who would never be able to meet an author. They're far too removed, and a lot of as I said, disadvantaged schools that wouldn't have the money and the funding to pay for authors to visit the schools. So I thought I would bring it over here with obviously Book Pen Pals permission, and they were very supportive. So very much the programme uses theirs as a template, and I've expanded it a little bit, so it's not just book recommendations. It's really just to instill and encourage that love of storytelling. So although we encourage the kids and the authors to say, I read this brilliant book the other day, have you read it? It's also to just encourage the kids to, believe in themselves and tell their stories. So yeah, that's really sort of the direction that we've moved into a little bit.
So many things that I love about that. How has the take-up been?
Extraordinary. When we first started talking about it last year, I think I just put a tweet out, would anyone be interested if I set something like this up? And the response was great. I had lots and lots of authors respond and say, yeah, brilliant, sign me up now. So I thought, all right, we'll go for it. Little did I know and expect that we've actually ended up with about 190 authors and illustrators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is just, phenomenal. And, we're talking very seasoned authors, experienced authors like Wendy Orr, who has, and Nova Wheatman, who have joined us, all the way through to, debuts, and all the way through also from sort of those who write picture books through to middle grade. So it's just been a phenomenal uptake in that sense. And then on the school side, I was very lucky to have Dee with me at this point, because she was excellent in sort of reaching out to different people that we could ask, can you reach out to your schools in your network? So we had great support from people like Alia, ASLA, the ILF. So lots and lots of different organisations across the country were sending out messages to their schools, to their teacher network. And I think we've ended up with over 250 classes. I don't know how many schools, to be honest. I haven't had the second to count, but it's definitely well over 250 individual classes.
And that's a whole lot of students.
Yeah, and that's across all states. Right up to the Torres Strait, so we've really reached far and wide across the country, and it's just amazing to see these connections being made, and these children, and actually the librarians and teachers getting so excited. I had a lovely message from a librarian the other day to say that she's creating a post box to have in the library, so when the kids write their letters, they can just post them into the little post box.
Super cool.
Yeah, so some really amazing creative ideas. We seem to be inspiring, so yeah, fabulous.
I just love that you're helping to bring back the romance of kind of letter writing too. And not only that, I think, a lot of the young kids today, I mean, obviously they're growing up in the internet world and the digital world, and this is really giving them opportunity to enjoy that, that old-fashioned romantic and fun anticipation of receiving a letter, because everything's going to be digital now. The only thing you really get in the post is either parcels you order or unwanted letters from the government, including bills. But wow. So for a generation or multiple generations that are coming up that may never really have a need for receiving letters, and now they're discovering this whole magical world of communication. It's so awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just that anticipation, like you say, of waiting. Oh, have we got a letter today? Has it come today? Knowing that it's coming and exciting. What's it going to say? How are we going to respond? Absolutely. And there is a lot of kids, I'm sure, who we're communicating with who maybe do struggle with reading and with writing. So having that teacher there to read the letters, to share it as a group, and then for those children to be able to put pen to paper, whether they're writing words or they're drawing a picture, anything really, just that sort of inspiration that we want to evoke in those children. And it's lovely. Waiting for a letter is a great thing. So I'm glad that we could bring that back.
I remember writing letters when I was a child because, of course, I'm too old to be brought up in the internet situation. And we were matched with a school, a country school. Lo and behold, some years later, this school came down to a netball tournament, and some of the girls were billeted with us, which was lovely. Caught up with her again. And then, like 15 years later, I'm walking down the hospital corridor, and there we both are in our nurses' uniforms. We kind of had lost track, but it was like, oh, there you are. So, and really just purely from somebody going, oh, let's write letters and get the city and country kids together. So you just don't know the impact, Kate, that you have, like, not only just immediately, obviously wonderful, but, long-term joy of reading and illustrating and, connecting with maybe, people want to be an author or want to be a writer or an illustrator. That's just lovely. Great initiative.
And that's the thing is, like, I think we can all kind of remember and look back, and there was always someone who we remember saying something or doing something that made a huge impact on us, and it sort of is something that you remember at certain various stages and milestones throughout your life. And I think that's kind of what we really hope that some of these authors can do, is just instill that little memory where a child will think, no, actually, you know what, my story is important, and I am going to tell it, and I am going to strive and try and be an author or an illustrator, or not just necessarily those two jobs, but the dream that they have, the thing that they want to do. And that's, to be able to maybe make that happen long into the future would just be incredibly special. Yeah.
Now, Kate, are your books closed, or can people still apply?
So we're probably quite close to capacity. As I say, we didn't really expect things to be quite this phenomenal in our first year. But we do still have some authors who have signed up, who are keen to pair with a class. What we are saying now to any new teachers who are reaching out to us is to maybe group classes as year groups, to give them more opportunity to get so everybody can have a pen pal. So then we ask the author to write to the entire year 5, for example, rather than individual classes. Because that way, they all get to read the letter and respond. But no, we're absolutely still taking on authors and schools. So if anybody is interested, get in touch.
Yeah, and how do they get in touch?
Well, they can visit the website, which is authorpenpals.com, or find me on social media at kfosterauthor, or email me at contact@katejfoster.com. And just any questions, any concerns. We're already looking towards 2024 and how we're going to run that programme. I think we're learning, Dee and I are learning very fast how to sort of manage the logistics of something like this. And I think we're hoping next year that potentially we can expand into high schools, so we can take in some YA authors as well. But really so much will depend on how many people sign up as to how we run the programme. If we have an unbelievable uptake from schools next year, then we will probably start to prioritise in terms of location and the area that the school is in. But yes, as for this year, we're still accepting anyone who writes for primary school children, and that's illustrators as well. We haven't had too many illustrators sign up, so it'd be lovely to have some more. And yes, schools, please keep reaching out and making contact, and hopefully we can match you up with a pen pal.
Very good. Darren, any last question for Kate before she finishes her peach, and I can't remember the pronunciation of your little bubbles.
Bellini.
Thank you. Before she finishes her peach Bellini and we let her off.
That's a cool word, Bellini. I think
it is, yeah. It's a lovely drink as well.
Should be used in a song. I'll have a million questions, but we haven't got time for that. But I just want to say, Kate, thank you so much for taking the initiative and even just considering to look at how to bring such what is obviously a magical experience for kids all across Australia. And the hunger out there for it is obvious, because the idea you had and brought it across, and now look at it, you're about to have to shut the door and say no more while you're already looking towards 2024. So all I can say is just a huge congratulations. And as far as putting a smile on kids' faces all around the country and bringing all different authors to light the hearts and inspire writing, I think it's in no safer hands than in your hands, Kate.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. That's really lovely. It's it's such a pleasure to do. I love it. I think I mentioned earlier, I do like being busy, and I do like just trying to inspire as many people as I can. You only get one go at this life, as far as we know, so I want to do something with that time. I've got so many ideas on how to expand this program as well, so I'm hoping next year we can take steps into maybe getting some funding, actually fund authors' visits to some of these remote schools. So who knows where it could lead. But thank you very much for those words. That really does mean a lot.
That's right. I'm just sitting here thinking that if anyone would have to do a forensic search on your Google search, I think a lot of it's going to be, how can I avoid sleep? How can I? What tricks to stay awake? How do we increase hours in the day?
Yes, that's probably there actually. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you too much there, so I'll leave that.
No, I suspect your passion has given you plenty of energy.
Yeah,
it does.
Thank you so much for dropping in, Kate, and everybody get onto authorpenpals.com. Have a look at all of the things that are on the website, or check out Kate's her Facebook and Twitter. Is that right? Facebook and Twitter? No, Instagram and Twitter.
It is Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, you're right.
Instagram and Twitter. I was right the first time. There you go. And don't forget, of course, her fabulous books, The Bravest Word and Pause, which I have gifted to several of my little people in my life, and she's got new books on the way out, Harriet Hounds and The Heroes Club. So that's not quite right. The Unlikely Heroes Club, which is even better.
That's it.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, thanks again, and bye for now.
Thanks for joining us in the lounge, Kate. All the very best. And I suspect that this is far from the last one we'll be talking. Take care. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I think it's time for quotes, Darren.
I think so as well.
Okay.
I'll just clear my little fuzzy head from the writer's lounge. But do tell what quote do you have for today?
So I have got a quote by William Zinsser. Now, so William Knowlton Zinsser was an American writer, editor, literary critic and teacher. Began his career as a journalist in New York, feature writer, drama editor, film critic, etc. But he also had, he wrote a book called On Writing Well. However, all that aside, this quote: "You'll never make your mark as a writer unless you develop a respect for words and a curiosity about their shades of meaning that is almost obsessive. The English language is rich in strong and supple words. Take time to root around and find the ones you want."
I like that. I like the idea of,
root around and find the ones you want, be obsessive about shades of meaning. And, given that we're talked about the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, where John Koenig has given us some really subtle new words, and I thought, yeah, this just fits. So William Zinser, thank you very much for that quote.
And I love the idea of sort of visualising mentally, when the part about the shades came in that quote.
Yes.
I had a quick little sort of mind flash of all words on like a palette, and where you can just swirl, get your brush, swirl your words around, and come up with different forms of expression, and really the palette's endless, isn't it, with words, and that's and I guess it comes back to that concept of jazz, to really know all the intricacies of the rules and then start breaking them. So know the words and then start using them in weird and wonderful ways that maybe they weren't even meant to be used for. So my quote today is a bit of a short one, but I like it. It's by John Keats. And it is as follows: poetry should strike the reader as a wording of his own highest thoughts and appear almost a remembrance. So, yeah, soft little bit of jazz there from John Keats. I like that. It reminded me of, deja vu, and I know there's scientific theories about what happens is there's some, temporary, minusculely temporary moment in time where inputting data comes in and is cross-referenced as a memory rather than a direct interpretation. Hence
or a
why
glitch in the matrix, of course.
Or a glitch in the matrix, yes. But generally the concept being that, you look at something and rather it come through the normal channel, it comes through as a memory, you go, well, I've seen that before. Yeah, obviously. So that's what that kind of made me think of here, because he's kind of saying, like, if you do poetry, if it's done just right, it will touch a part of you to the point where maybe, it appears as some, you're reading your own memory.
Like a memory, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah. Thank you, Mr. John Keats.
Indeed.
That's a very cool quote.
And, of course, don't forget, listeners, if you are a writer and you have a book or poetry or a short story to share, you can submit that for free and have it listed up on the Australian Book Lovers website. And if you're a reader, please jump over there and scroll through the hundreds and hundreds of books we have and choose to support an Australian author by having a read of one of their stories. AustralianBookLovers.com/booklovers also gets you onto the subscribers book list for free giveaways and a little bit more information about various books and bits and pieces. That's about it.
Yes,
Now,
well, it's not about it because...
Well, we've got the takeover. Of course, you can find us on social media at Australian Books on Twitter and Australian Book Lovers on Instagram. We're on YouTube and LinkedIn. But now, the byline. We both have a little verse rather than sound effects.
Well, yes, to celebrate poetry, we're going to go... Well, I'm going to attempt. I haven't written anything down, but I have been quietly thinking about it. I'm going to try. It's going to be a short one, I'm thinking, but I'd love to hear your poetry-infused take.
Super short. Take care for now and remember how to read more Aussie books.
Oh, okay. That's more... Is that like a... What's the Japanese one? The haiku?
Oh, the haiku. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's think. I've been playing around with the head a little bit, but I'm just flying blind here, so there's definitely nothing written. So I'm thinking, hey there, we've got a website. Come take a look. There's so much treasure there. No. Hey there, we've got a website. Come take a look. You'll find a wonderful Australian book. There we go.
Beautiful.
Yay.
Yeah, that's good.
I was going to say, because I can't, yeah. It needed an SC, then it could have been something else, and then read more Aussie books.
I have a few looks, but anyway, that's all right. You can work on that for next time.
Yes, that is my homework, homework.
That is your next time. But for next time, we are chatting with Ashley Kalajian Blunt, particularly about her book Dark Mode and the Dark Web. So I think that you are going to enjoy that interview, Darren.
I think so too.
Right up your alley with conspiracy theories. So stay tuned, people, and really enjoy your life, enjoy your poetry, put pen to paper if you've never thought about doing that, and we will see you next time.
Thank you everyone for joining us for episode 79, and can't wait to join you for episode 80, which means of course we're also heading to the 80s for life in Australia, which is pretty exciting. But take care for now.
Bye for now.
Let's meet again. magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.